My name is Detective Ethan Cole, and I've seen a lot in my 15 years on the force, but nothing quite like this. When the call came in that morning, the dispatcher's voice was tight, almost trembling. You're going to want to get to Channel 7 News. Now, Channel 7 was a staple in the city, the kind of morning show that people left on while sipping coffee and packing lunches. But today, the viewers had seen something no one could unsee. Claire Hathaway, the network's golden girl, was dead. Shot live on air as she transitioned from a weather segment to a light-hearted story about kittens. By the time I arrived, the studio was in chaos. Cameramen stood around in stunned silence, their faces pale. Makeup artists huddled together, some crying into tissues. The station manager, a stout man named Frank DeLuca, rushed toward me as soon as I ducked under the yellow tape. "Detective Cole, thank God you're here," he said, his voice strained. This is a nightmare." He wasn't wrong. Claire's body was still slumped in her chair at the news desk, her signature blonde hair now streaked with crimson. A single bullet had ended her life, and judging by the angle, it had come from somewhere offset. "Who found her?" I asked, pulling out my notebook. "She was on air when it happened," Frank said, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's all on tape. The feed cut to black immediately after, but it's out there. People saw it." I nodded grimly and gestured to one of the uniformed officers. "Secure the footage. I'll need to see it." As I began to piece together the scene, my eyes caught a folded piece of paper on Claire's desk. It was out of place amidst the polished teleprompters and neatly arranged notes. The letter wasn't addressed to anyone in particular, but the message was chilling. "Your lies end today. The truth will out." "Frank," I said, holding up the letter. "Who had access to this desk before the broadcast?" His face paled. "Just the usual crew, but we've had tensions lately." Claire wasn't exactly everyone's favorite. That was an understatement. As the hours wore on, I learned that Claire's life was a web of rivalries and secrets. Her co-anchor, Lisa Monroe, had been gunning for Claire's spot for years. Their on-air chemistry masked a deep off-air animosity. Then there was Todd Grayson, the station's investigative reporter, who'd clashed with Claire over a story she'd allegedly stolen. And it didn't stop there. Claire's private life was just as messy. An anonymous tip led me to a high-end apartment she'd rented under a pseudonym. Inside, I found evidence of an affair with a married businessman, a man with enough to lose that he might kill to protect his secrets. But the breakthrough came when I reviewed the broadcast footage. Slowing it down frame by frame, I spotted something the initial investigators had missed. A shadow moving in the background, near the control room window. Someone had been there. Tracking down the shadow wasn't easy, but persistence paid off. It led me to Nate Harris, the station's quiet, unassuming audio technician. When I brought him in for questioning, he cracked under the pressure. "She ruined my life," he confessed, tears streaming down his face. "I loved her, but she didn't care. She laughed at me. Said I was pathetic." It was a grim ending to a grim case. Claire Hathaway had lived a life in the spotlight, but it was her shadows that ultimately caught up with her. As I left the station that night, the city's skyline lit up with the glow of televisions, each one broadcasting the latest updates on the story. And I couldn't help but wonder, how many more lies would unravel now that the truth was out? The case might have been closed, but something about it gnawed at me. Sure, Nate Harris had confessed, and the evidence against him seemed airtight. But loose threads remained, threads that kept me awake long after I filed the paperwork. Claire Hathaway's life wasn't just complicated, it was labyrinthine. And Nate's motive, while personal and raw, didn't feel like the full story. A week after Nate's arrest, I got a call from an unexpected source. Lisa Monroe, Claire's co-anchor. She insisted on meeting me off the record. We agreed to meet at a dimly lit diner on the edge of town. The place was quiet, save for the soft hum of a jukebox playing a tune no one cared to recognize. Lisa's usually flawless, camera-ready demeanor was gone. She looked tired, vulnerable, and, dare I say, afraid. "I don't think Nate did it," she said without preamble, stirring her coffee with a shaking hand. I raised an eyebrow. "He confessed, Lisa. What makes you so sure?" She glanced around nervously, then leaned in. "Claire had enemies. Real enemies. Nate was just convenient. Too convenient. There's something bigger going on here, detective." "Like what?" I asked, folding my arms. "You'd better start talking." Lisa hesitated, as if weighing the risks of whatever she was about to say. Finally she sighed. Claire was working on a story. Something big. She wouldn't tell me the details, but she said it was going to blow the roof off the city. She was scared, paranoid even. She thought someone was watching her. Did she say who? My pen hovered over my notebook, ready to catch every word. No, but she mentioned a name once. Randall. That's all I know. Randall. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. And it was more than anyone else had given me. After Lisa left, I started digging. Randall wasn't a name that immediately rang any bells, but a deep dive into Claire's emails, phone records, and that secret apartment turned up a connection. Randall Cross, a real estate magnate with ties to half the city's politicians and enough shady deals to fill a novel. He was also the married businessman Claire had been seeing. Things clicked into place like puzzle pieces. Randall had motive, plenty of it. If Claire was working on a story about him, exposing his corruption, or even threatening to reveal their affair, it could destroy him. But why kill her live on air? It was bold, reckless, and unnecessarily public. Unless that was the point. A message. A warning. I paid Randall a visit at his sprawling mansion, but he was as cool as they come. Detective Cole? He greeted me with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tragic what happened to Claire. I can't imagine who would do such a thing. His denial was smooth, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes when I mentioned the threatening letter left on Claire's desk. "Your lies end today," I quoted, watching him closely. He didn't flinch, but his hand tightened around the glass of scotch he was holding. "I'm afraid I can't help you, detective. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting." As I left his mansion, I couldn't shake the feeling that Randall Cross was hiding something. But without hard evidence, my hands were tied. Still, I wasn't about to let this go. Back at the precinct, I reviewed everything again. The footage, the evidence, Nate's confession. Something Lisa had said nagged at me. Claire thought someone was watching her. Digging into security footage from the station, I found it. A week before the murder, Claire had been followed by a man in a dark coat and hat. His face was obscured, but his build and gait were distinctive. He wasn't a member of the station staff, and no one seemed to know who he was. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became that Nate Harris was just a pawn. Someone had orchestrated this, and they'd used Nate's obsession with Claire to cover their tracks. But who? And why? The answers were out there, tangled in the shadows of a city that thrived on secrets. And I wasn't done chasing them, not by a long shot. The deeper I dug, the darker the story became. Randall Cross wasn't just a businessman with a scandal to hide. He was the puppet master of a city-wide conspiracy. Through bribes, blackmail, and threats, he controlled the media, the police, and even local government. And Claire Hathaway had uncovered it all. But I still lacked proof, solid, undeniable evidence that could connect Randall to Claire's murder. That changed when I received an unmarked envelope at my office. Inside was a USB drive. No note, no explanation. Just a drive. The files on it were explosive: emails, wire transfers, surveillance photos, and a recording of a heated argument between Randall and Claire. The audio was grainy, but Randall's voice was unmistakable. "You don't understand what you're playing with, Claire," he growled. "Drop the story or you won't live to see it air." Claire's response was defiant. "I'm not afraid of you, Randall. The truth is coming out." It was the smoking gun I needed. But I wasn't the only one who had it. As I stared at the files, a news alert popped up on my phone. Channel 7 News had just aired an anonymous exposé. Everything Claire had uncovered about Randall, his empire, and his crimes. The story was live and the city was watching. I raced to Channel 7, knowing Randall wouldn't take this lying down. The newsroom was buzzing with activity as reporters scrambled to cover the fallout. Frank DeLuca met me at the entrance, his face pale but resolute. "I don't know who sent us the files, but we had to air it, detective," he said. "It's what Claire would have wanted." Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from the parking lot. I rushed outside, drawing my weapon. A black SUV screeched to a halt, and out stepped Randall Cross, flanked by 2 bodyguards. His calm, smug demeanor was gone, replaced by fury. "This is slander," he shouted, pointing a finger at Frank. "You're all going to pay for this." "Randall Cross," I called out, stepping forward. "You're under arrest for the murder of Claire Hathaway." He laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "You think you can take me down? You have no idea who you're dealing with." But I did. The files weren't just proof of his crimes, they were a roadmap to dismantling his empire. And as the first squad cars arrived to back me up, Randall realized his power was slipping away. The arrest made headlines, but it wasn't the end of the story. Randall's trial was a media circus, with every dirty secret Claire had uncovered laid bare. Nate Harris, cleared of the murder charges, was transferred to a psychiatric facility to get the help he desperately needed. As for me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet closure. Claire's story had cost her everything, but in the end, her determination to expose the truth brought down a man who thought himself untouchable. One evening, weeks after the trial, I found myself back at Channel 7, standing in the quiet studio where it all began. Claire's desk had been cleared, but her presence lingered. A photo of her smiling, vibrant, and alive now adorned the wall, a reminder of her courage and the price she paid for it. As I left the studio, the city skyline stretched before me, glowing with the lights of a place still grappling with its secrets. Claire's story was over, but mine wasn't. There were more lies to uncover, more truths to fight for. And I wasn't done, not yet.